Hello, welcome back to my channel. I'm JC and today's video is going to be my masterclass experience. Walter Mosley teaches fiction and storytelling. This actually was requested by a number of people. I was excited to take it and also a little embarrassed to admit or realize really that I haven't really read Walter Mosley like that. I've only read Devil in the Blue Dress. It was a very long time ago. I don't know why I've never really read him, but I want to read him now. He has like over 50 plus books that I need to, well, not the science fiction ones because I'm not really a sci-fi person. I'm definitely going to put him on my reading list for next year because I have already made my list this year. Unless I finish that list, and then we'll see. But I really enjoyed this class. Really different perspective on storytelling and plot versus story and character development, and I liked his take on it. I got a lot out of it. I'm definitely going to make myself well versed in all things Walter Mosley. But for now, I'm just gonna slide on over and let you enjoy Walter Mosley's masterclass.
Fiction is one of the few things that we can do in the modern world in which you make something from nothing. Writing and storytelling, everybody does. Without the fictive imagination, there is no growth. Everything remains the same. When you're an artist, when you're a writer, when you're making up different ways of seeing the world, understanding the world, considering what happened, what didn't happen, you are actually changing the world, whether they know it or not, whether they read the book or not. The beautiful thing about any day is it can happen. Today, all of a sudden, you realize, hey, my wheels aren't spinning anymore. They are spinning, but I'm actually moving forward. I'm not sitting in place. My name is Walter Mosley. I'm a black man in America. I'm an artist. I'm a writer. I guess I mostly think of myself as a novelist because that's what I do day in and day out and have done for nearly half my life. I think in this period of time that we have together, you will learn how to plumb the depths of your intellect and your soul to find the right words, the right structure, the right story, the right characters to create the novel that's in you, and that will take you forward into the world. I wanted to teach this masterclass because I want people to understand that a novel isn't putting the left front tire on the Volkswagen on the production line. The novel is creating a whole new mode of transportation, a whole new mode of understanding the world. And I think that over the last 30 years of being a novelist, I've learned how that's worked, and I've made a commitment to it. And I would love to talk to you about that commitment. The hardest thing you're ever going to face in writing a novel is believing in something that has come from seemingly nothing. I hope what you take away from this experience is the confidence that if you do what we've talked about here, the novel will appear. I've published just about 60 books. It is my hope that if you take this course of study seriously, that you will be able to write the novel that's in your heart. If you're afraid to start writing the novel, okay, write the novel. I'm not asking you to not be afraid. That's not going to help. Be afraid, but take the jump. I'm Walter Mosley, and this is my masterclass. Many times people ask me, they say, what is my writing process? I write wherever I am, and I write whenever I wake up in the morning. But usually I wake up about 5 or 6, and I write for 3 hours almost every day. My goal has always been to write 1,000 words. Not 1,000 perfect words, just 1,000 words. I do that on, let's say, Monday. I wake up, 6 o'clock, write 3 hours, 1,000 words. Next day, I wake up at 5 o'clock. I start writing. The first thing I do is reread that 1,000 words I wrote yesterday. Make very small editing on that. And then I write my next 1,000 words. When I tell you that you should write every day, I'm speaking to exactly 99% of you. Most people get the best work out of getting up every day and writing for 3 hours. And when I say get up, a lot of people write in the middle of the night. Okay, fine. If that's the best time you write, that's what you should be writing. You will find if you write every day that the next day ideas have bubbled up from someplace that you had no idea were there. If you stick to my schedule of writing for 2 to 3 hours every day, you will have a completed novel in a year's time. If you've gotten up in the morning and you're sitting down in front of a piece of paper in front of a screen, you start writing, and nothing comes, and nothing comes, and nothing comes, and you look at the clock and it's been an hour and 27 minutes and nothing has come yet, the answer is to push through that. The best way to push through that, the most satisfying ways, is to start writing words, and really any words. And don't ever be upset with yourself as long as you took the 3 hours to write. Enough days of maybe writing gibberish will slowly turn into something, and you'll be amazed. Wow, so this is what my character thinks. He thinks all these crazy things. Well, how do I start to put them together? That's on Thursday and Friday and Saturday and next Saturday. It will hurt sometimes. It will feel like you're not getting anywhere. It will feel like you're failing. But that's okay. Such a large part of art is failure. Many people, maybe you, are frightened by the blank page. How do I start? The blank page invites anybody. The idea is that the blank page makes no judgment on you. And nobody's going to read it but you. It's there in front of you. And do not be weighed down by a novel like War and Peace that had 100 drafts. Because you're just writing the first step of the first draft. You don't have to worry about anything. The concept of rewriting is worth spending some time on. I don't even think about writing. There's pre-writing and there's rewriting. The pre-writing is the first draft of your novel. The rewriting is going over that novel and saying, okay, this is working, I'm saying all these amazing things that I didn't really know were there. I'm wasting a lot of time saying this other stuff. And you're restructuring. Every time you go through that novel, you might read through the whole 500-page novel and only change one word. Well, that's a new draft of that novel. That's rewriting. A novel is a living being that you're creating out of your soul. It may not be a perfect creature. It may have some, flaws and deficits. It may not, in the end, work well enough to get published. But you have to finish your novel in order to know what's right and wrong with you writing the novel. I have written very many books. I think it is 60 that I've published. I love writing. I get up every day and I start writing. I start telling stories. I start trying to understand and describe and to plumb the depths. I've written almost every day for over 30 years. In that time, I've gotten deeper and deeper and deeper into my own unconscious. And so my stories have changed, have grown, have gotten deeper in many ways. And so me writing today is different than me writing yesterday. And me writing tomorrow will be different than me writing today. If you make the commitment to write every day, you will get deeper and deeper, better and better. And it'll be great for your writing, but it'll also be great for you as a person, being able to understand this incredibly complex world that we live in. I've shared with you my process, and I hope that you can find your own within the structure that I presented. But if you can't, if you have to work outside of that, if you wake up one day and said, "Oh, I feel a novel coming on," and you have to sit down for the next week and write it, that's fine. I have complete respect for that. This is a masterclass, but inside this masterclass, we are equals.
Okay, so in lesson number 2, Walter Mosley talks about his writing routine and how he works and what works for him. Not as a way of trying to tell anyone what they should do, but he does say that if you're serious about writing, if you're going to take it seriously, that you need to commit to some sort of writing routine, whichever writing routine works for you. His, in particular, he commits to writing every day for 2 to 3 hours, whether it's 2 hours or 3 hours, writing 1,000 words at least every single day. I mean, if he writes more, that's good, but he doesn't quit writing for the day until he has at least written 1,000 words for that particular day. Um, Sometimes he said he'll leave it at 1,000 words just to kind of get in the flow and be able to pick it up the next day. Next lesson.
Start to talk about writing, when we start to talk about storytelling, everybody or almost everybody knows writing, knows storytelling. Not only that, they probably do writing and storytelling every day. So what I want to do is pull out some of the elements of what you already do every day and make it into a more kind of structured and to some degree codified system. So I'm going to talk to you about plot versus story, character versus character development, the music of language, the importance of poetry. All of these things I'll talk about. They are elements of fiction, but you have to know how they work in order to use them technically in writing a novel. The most important thing you're ever going to do in your novel is that after every sentence, every paragraph, every page, and every chapter, your reader's going to wonder, what happens next? One of the easiest ways to get them to do that is to hook them on the problem or the situation that the main character or characters are in. Once you understand that these people are going to have trouble, or these people might find treasure, or these people might finally escape from prison, then you're deeply involved in who they are and what they're trying to do. Once you're there, you want to turn the page, because the novel is not written if the reader doesn't want to turn the page. People read novels for 2 reasons. They read it for entertainment on a light level, and they read it to further understand human character, human nature on another. In order to answer the second, deeper issue, the character has to learn something. The character has to change. character doesn't have to become better. The character doesn't have to become good. It could be the opposite. He could start off good and become bad. He could start off hopeful and end up a pessimist. But he has to be impacted by this world that we're reading about. And therefore, we, the reader, can more closely identify with that character and hopefully understand a little something about ourselves. The best way to develop a complex, engaging character is to not worry about developing a complex, engaging character, because that's a big question, right? You want to write about somebody who you feel you understand or that you can understand, and you want to learn about that person as you write about them. And that layers and complicates the character, but not from the beginning. It's not like you sit down and say, okay, first I have to figure out how I'm going to make a complex character. Well, how tall is he? How angry is he? What was his mother's name? You don't want to go through all that stuff. At least I don't want to go through all that stuff. All I need to know is that I have a character, I know what the situation he's in, and how he starts to respond to it, and how people respond to him begins to tell me who he is and how he might change. I honestly believe that just writing in the voice of a character or from the shoulder of a character is going to show us who he or she is, and it's going to help us develop that character. One of the best ways, as I said, to develop a character is to put that character in relationship to another person. So as they talk, as they fight, as they work together, we find out more about who they are and what they are.
Lesson number 3 is really short and simple. He talks about developing fictional characters. Mostly what I took from that lesson is that your character needs a predicament. You need to give your character a problem, something to figure out. There needs to be some conflict, some tension. There has to be a problem that most likely impacts character, not just some flippant problem that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things for that character. It has to be something that's going to change the character or have them evolve throughout the story. I also talks about how sometimes your character is revealed in the way that they relate with the other characters in your story. So be mindful of how you are shaping the relationships between your main character and the side characters, and because how they interact with the other characters also tells a bit about who they are as the main character. Next lesson.
Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy goes out with girl's brother. I mean, that's a story. You have 3 characters. They have potential for growth and for change, and they experience each other. They have conflict. They're torn apart. They're brought back together. That's a story. There's not a whole bunch of different stories, but how that story occurs, that's the plot. Oh, where did the boy meet the girl? What did the girl think about the boy? What was the brother? Where was he at the time, and what was he thinking? What's going on in boy's life? What's going on in girl's life? All these things we slowly begin to understand, and we understand the tensions and the conflicts between them that cause the changes and the revelations. Story is what happens. Plot is when the reason it happens or the reasons that it happens are revealed to the reader. The story is a cloud-like definition of the novel you're going to write. But the story alone is not a novel, it's just a story. This happened, that happened, this happened, the end. A story, you can't have a novel without a story. But a story is not a novel. The simplest way to describe plot is that it is the structure of revelation. I like that term because it works on two levels. One, it's a pedestrian level. Well, when do I find out what the girl's mother is like? When do I find out these things? That's a very pedestrian thing. But the other reveal that happens is you find out who the person is through why they're there, what they've done, why they've done what they've done. You want to be surprised. You want your assumptions to be questioned. You want the novel to tell you something about the world that you didn't know about when you started reading this book. And so as elements and character traits and situations reveal themselves, we become more and more engaged in what is happening, and we worry more and more about what will happen. And this is the reason that people read novels, to understand character, to understand character transition, to understand why what I want I can never have, or what I'm trying to escape from is myself. These are big issues in any kind of novel. And without plot, you can never get there, because you just know everything from the beginning. It's just a story. But it's not just a story, it's a story about characters. And the characters are deep and complex and always changing.
So in lesson number 4, he talked about story versus plot, how the story occurs, the tensions and the conflicts and everything involved in writing, your story. You want to have good tension, good conflict with characters and the secondary characters or the side characters. But he talked about, I like the way that he characterized the differentiation between story and plot. He says story is what happens, but the plot is when the reason why it happens is revealed. And when he said that, I was just like, oh. Talked about plot is the structure of revelation, using the story for a plot reveal. And he says you can have a story without writing a novel, but you cannot have a novel without having a story. So story is very important, and the plot is subsequently important to the story. So I like that lesson. It was a very short lesson, but I loved it. Next lesson.
When you write a novel is told from a certain point of view. A certain voice is telling you the novel. Without that, it's not a novel, it's not a story. You have to decide who's telling your story, who's telling your novel, and that's a narrative voice. There's all kinds of narrative voices. There's the first person narrative, where there is a living human being telling you the story that happened in her experience, from her eyes and ears and mind. There's the second person narrative, which is hardly ever used in novels, often used in how-to books and poetry, which is somebody is saying, you walk into the door, you pick up the hat from the floor, you see the blood on the floor. It makes you telling the story, but I'm telling you that you're telling the story. It doesn't work very well in fiction. Then there's the third person narrative. That's a person who's sitting on the shoulder of a character, who sees everything that character sees. They're not that character, so they don't have the emotional responses that the character has, but they see it and they explain it. And every once in a while, they have a little insight into what that person is thinking. Third person narrative is very good because it feels objective, which is good for it. We're seeing things happen, and we can make our own minds about how they feel. But also because it's more than from more than one point of view. A third person narrative can, I can be talking to you, and then you leave the room, and my narrator jumps off my shoulder and jumps onto your shoulder and follows you to another room. So I can see it from many different points of view. If I'm writing a novel with very many different characters who are very different kinds of characters, and I need to see what they're experiencing. And then there's the universal narrator, which can be translated to God, and God knows everything. Yeah, this character knows everything. It seems like a great way to write a novel because then you can tell them everything you want. But it's not very convincing unless your voice is very, 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 very sophisticated. Dialogue in a novel is so important because it allows you some leeway. For instance, if you have a first-person narrative and we're only hearing from you, we may not understand you completely because you have a certain view of yourself, but you could be wrong about some things. But if all of a sudden somebody comes in and they start talking to you or about you, then we have another way of seeing you. Dialogue's also interesting because novels are about people, or at least living beings who transform, and so to hear people talk brings us deeper and deeper into the human element of the novel. Dialogue is also interesting because people talk differently. If you have, a PhD from Harvard in English literature, you're going to talk one kind of way. If you dropped out of school in the second grade and and live in the underbelly of the Bowery, you're going to have a whole different way of talking, and that's musical. Dialogue connected with dialect gives us all kinds of information that are really, really wonderful. Dialogue connected with dialect gives us all kinds of information that are really, really wonderful. There's all kinds of things that you can do with dialogue, and not only dialogue, with street signs, newspaper art, movies playing on television. There's all kinds of different ways to bring information inside a narrative voice, which may be different than the one that you need for this particular piece of information. Once you get deeply involved in writing a novel, everything comes together. You split it up at some point. You say, story, you say plot, you say character, you say character development, you say dialogue, you say dialect. And that's all wonderful, but they're not separate. They're all working together. The only dialogue is going to come from characters. The idea is you're explaining a character while that character is explaining his world. So you're doing two things with the dialogue. You're telling us all the stuff about him and who he is, and about the world that he lives in and that he believes he lives in. And you'll find out later on the kind of character that Easy actually wants to become, just not maybe so evil. Dialogue is the song of your characters. It is the response to the story of your novel. It is very often the moment of revelation in plot. Dialogue is the firmament on which the novel stands. And if you use it correctly, if you use it in a proper way, you're going to understand who people are and what they're doing by what they're saying. Slowly, draft after draft, dialogue alters to become the basket to hold your story.
Lesson number 5, he talked about narrative voice, point of view, dialogue, and he actually broke down the differences between the first person, second person, third person narrative, and the universal narrator, which is the omniscient voice. We all know first person is I, the second person narrative is you perspective, and the third person is the person sitting on the shoulder of the character. He said he writes in first person mostly, but he does tend to sometimes maybe write in third person. And in terms of dialogue, he talks about when you do dialogue, it's meant to bring the reader further into the story. Connecting with dialect um, gives another interesting dynamic. And he's talking about dialogue can be a good tool for character revelation. It can let you know how the character dialogues with the other characters, but not just that, but also how the person has dialogue with themselves, their inner thoughts. How we talk to ourselves or how the character talks to themselves can be very different than how the character talks to the other characters in the story, which can reveal a lot about that character, who they are as a person, what kind of person they are, whether this is a character you would even like. So basically, dialogue holds it's the basket that holds the story. Is how he put it. I didn't put it that way. That's how he phrased it. Yeah. Next lesson.
People living in everyday life, it's just an everyday life. It's the regular thing. But when you're reading a novel, you really want to understand the jeopardy that every person is in when they're in a novel and in that story, and vivid language helps us become a part of that story. It brings us into the story. Vivid language helps you to really experience what's happening. There are two kinds of images that you can use in writing: the simile and the metaphor. The simile says, this was like something else. And the metaphor says, this is something else. So you might say, Joe was like a big black bear. That's a good simile. He was like a big black bear. You can also say, Joe was a big black bear. Now, we take on, say, he's not like a bear. He's not something that I can get around. He was immovable. He was inescapable. He was a big black bear, and he was going to claw me to death. That's how powerful the metaphor is. Similes are nice, when you don't want to be an immediate threat. It's like, he was, as fat as an apple. All right, okay, fine. We know he's round. I'm good. We got it. We got an image for it. That's cool. And we can go on from there. It's always better to say clang, 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 rather than there was a loud noise of metal on metal in the next room. It's always better to make us feel it. And a lot of times you're going to have to be expository. A lot of times you are going to have to just say, Joe said he loved Jeanette, But as much as possible, you want to get beyond that. You should show me what is being seen by the main character, what's being seen by the narrator. You don't need to tell me what's happening. He looked into her eyes, and his heart started beating at an extraordinary rate. That's better than saying, he looked at her and got excited. You've given me a feeling. You've given me something that I can hold on to. You're giving me something that I know. You're giving me something that's both passionate and pedestrian. That's what you want.
The next lesson, number 6, he's talking about descriptive language and vivid language. But what I took away most from this lesson is the descriptive language, because I will admittedly say that I need to work on my descriptions a bit better, settings in particular, but just descriptions overall. He was talking about having the character describe that they're excited without using the word excited, or describe that they're angry without using the word angry. Um, giving you the feeling with your details. Like saying you heard a noise in the house. You know, if you're writing a mystery, I heard a noise. Instead of I heard noise, the clang clang of the metal or the, that would be more descriptive, a better descriptive way to say she heard a noise. Yeah, that part of the lesson was very helpful for me. Um, Next lesson.
Fiction, which is the seat of desire, is what tells us what our world is like, what we wish our world was like, what it had been, and what we wished it had been. When you read Western fiction, and it's probably true of everywhere else too, you'll find that before 1920, as a rule, there were no women outside of certain roles in fiction. There were no people of color out of certain roles in history. They didn't really have a history. They were supporting characters to a broad white male story. If you want to be in the culture, in the history of the culture, considered in that history, then you have to exist in the fiction. If you don't exist in the literature of that country, your people don't exist. So I wanted to write about Black people living in Los Angeles, down along Central Avenue, and what their lives were like and where they came from and what they were thinking and what they were eating and what music they were listening to and making and creating and what kind of trouble they got into. And if I could write about that, then other people could read about it and say, hey, wow, my life is a lot like their lives are. And then you're a part of history. When I'm thinking about the history of literature, of film, of theater, it becomes so difficult to wonder if it's all been a conspiracy. Because it kind of feels like a conspiracy. Because what happens is, if everything that you see and read has nothing to do with the people you know and love, then you begin to think that you and your people are in some way lesser. The most important thing in writing is telling a good story well. That's the most important thing. You know, if you enter a story and say, well, I'm trying to get people to understand, what it's like to be a Chicano working in the fields, picking, strawberries. Well, I mean, that's actually a very good thing to want to do. But what you have to worry about is the story. If it's not a good story, I'm not going to read it. If you say, well, you should feel this and you should feel that and you should feel, who cares? Even if somebody's Black, I say, well, this Black person is mad because this and this happened. I'm not interested in that. Just show me the story and allow the reasons to come out behind that. So I'm actually saying, the opposite of what many people might say. Tell me a good story. And in that good story, I'll buy anything else you add. Lots of people come up to me and say, like this, they say, well, in order to write, you have to read, don't you? And I went, no, you don't. The idea of telling a story is not about reading a story. Otherwise, what you end up with is writers writing about writers writing. And there are people like that. They read books and they write books, and they become very similar. To be a writer, you have to be able to tell a story. Anybody can tell a story. We hear stories. We know stories. We know stories about what happened to our fathers or our mothers or our lovers or ourselves. Deep, powerful stories that have nothing to do with reading a book. Now, I'm not trying to say that reading is a thing that people shouldn't do. You like reading books, read books. Absolutely. But don't mistake the fact that you're reading books with the issue of you becoming a good writer or a person who can write a beginning, middle, and end. Reading and writing are two different things. And if we know that, then it's fine. And if you like reading, great. Reading is very important. It's one of the most important things we do. But it's not necessarily going to make you a writer. Genre is a really interesting question. What is a genre? There's so many different kinds of genres. But in the end, writing is writing. It's the same language, it's the same words, it's the same grammar. It's everything put into slightly different structures, seen in slightly different ways, labored over by slightly different numbers of people. Genre is only limiting for a writer if a writer feels limited by that genre. If you like writing romances or cozy mysteries or very intellectual short stories, that's your thing, that's great. Do that. The day you feel limited by it, do something else.
So, number 9, he talks about genre and the rules of fiction. He says you don't need to be a big reader to be a good writer. You just have to be able to tell a story, and anyone can tell a story. He says reading is not necessarily going to make you a better writer, but he also says to ignore the gatekeepers of literature, gatekeepers being the people, the trending, the popularity, what's supposed to be the go-to topic that you should write about, or that publishers will tell you need to write about this. He basically says ignore that. Um, write in whatever genre you want to write in. If you want to write in multiple genres, you should write in multiple genres. Don't let anyone tell you. He basically said, don't let anyone tell you that you have to subject yourself to sticking to one genre for your entire writing career, because it's not true. Um, Genre is only limiting for a writer if the writer feels limited by that genre. That is letting the genre limit you instead of you using the genre as your tool. It's limiting you and constricting you, and Okay, next lesson.
Well, I wrote a novel on fishing, and I said, well, I want to get it published. So I sent it to a whole bunch of agents and some publishers, and everyone said, wonderful writing, wonderful characterization, but it's not commercial. Can't publish. Can't represent it. I later on realized, this is 1987, 88, I realized that they were saying that the two main characters are young black men in the Deep South, not necessarily educated. There are black women in it, but they're not major characters in it. There's only one white person in it, she's crazy. And they said to me, well, white people don't read about black people, black women don't like black men, and black men don't read, so who's going to buy your book? That was basically the concept. There are all kinds of critics in fiction. There are all kinds of prejudices in fiction. There are all kinds of people say, I never read women, I never read men, I never read black people, I never read white people, I don't read science fiction, I don't read, mysteries. Like, they have no idea what that means. Like all mysteries are the same, all science fiction is the same. And you run into these problems. Everybody runs into these problems. So what do you do about it? You live with it. In America, you're going to get identified as something. I was a black mystery writer when I started writing. And so, okay, I'm a black mystery writer. But then I wrote a book of science fiction, and, publisher said, I won't publish that. And I said, that's okay, I'll go to another publisher. Then I wrote, like a nonfiction book, and then I wrote a young adult book, and then I wrote an erotic book, and, I write everything. So either you change how you define me, or you figure out how to sell what I've written. Those are the choices. It doesn't matter to me that, when somebody else tries to define me. It's okay if somebody else thinks they've defined you. The problem comes when you believe that they've defined you. My suggestion to you, to begin with, is to write every day and to concentrate on doing the best work you can to finish the book, to make the book something that you're proud of, that you can understand, that you wouldn't mind showing to other people. Once you start showing it to other people, you run into a whole other series of problems. People will not want to publish it, people will reject it, people will say, what do you think you're doing? Most people are going to reject it. Sometimes you learn something from the rejections. They give you some information which is helpful, which is useful. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're very lucky. People want to publish your novel, just like that. It does happen. You should keep sending things out. You should keep doing it, and you should keep the faith in that this may be years. I won't lie to you, it might take a long time. Some people never get published, but that's the minority. Most people, sooner or later, do get published. And you will then build a career from there. I believe that if you are interested in being a writer, you have to figure out, number one, what you want from that. If what you want from being a writer is to write literary novels, then you should write them. If it's writing science fiction novels, you should write them. If it's writing both, you should do that. I encourage you to follow your heart in writing. If you follow your heart, if you do what you love, if you get to the place where you succeeded in starting from the beginning of a novel and getting to the end of the novel, then you're doing the best you can do. You're living in the best moment of your life. What comes of that later is what comes of that later. You have to follow your heart inside of writing, and you have to do it every day. As a writer, which you are, and as a potential writer, which we all are, there's a person who exists in your core. And the more you write, the more you come in relation to that internal person. And as you do that, you become more and more and more talented and capable. And you're able to control things about yourself that your whole life you've tamped down because they've frightened you. Writing about anything that you're really trying to explain, that you're really trying to get an idea across, a feeling across, a character across, that is going to help you define who you are, what you're thinking, and what you think of the world that surrounds you. I'm very excited about being a writer, and it's one of the things that I love about it. It keeps your mind alive in ways that everything else in this overly organized society tries to destroy. As a novelist, as an artist of any type, it's a completely broad motion, and I love it so much, that and the discovery of yourself through your own work. But when you're writing a novel, you should say all those things as much as possible. Say everything that you think that the character is doing. You have license to say whatever you feel, whatever your characters feel. You write that and you follow that, and that will bring you to the story you want to tell, not the story that some editor somewhere feels will be acceptable. Write your truth and believe in it.
Lesson number 11, he talks about discovering yourself through your writing. It's a way to discover who you are. Also, to discover maybe how something hurt you, or how to cope with something, or how to deal with a particular trauma or whatever. It's writing is discovering things, mostly about yourself. Next lesson.
I think that you'll find that all life, not only human life, but all life is based on the ability to be creative, to be able to change in the face of any situation. Human beings, every moment of their life is creative. Anybody who's had a child knows that that child is continually taking in and recreating what they see, what they know, how they think, and in order to be able to train themselves to deal with the world. And I think that much of education, much of the university, much of public education teaches you not to think, not to be creative, not to be different. And in doing so, strangles its own culture. Your whole life has to be a life of being creative if you're going to be like an artist. And that's really very difficult because creativity is defined by how much money it's worth by almost everyone. I believe that we should be creative, we should be artists in every moment, every element of our lives. But I feel that this is a deep commitment which promises happiness and heartbreak. It is okay to create just for yourself. As a matter of fact, you will never be better at creating if you do it just for yourself. Now, I'm not to say that you shouldn't try to write a book and sell a book and make some money, but the truth is, in the end, you have to be doing the work and you have to love the work. If you no longer love the work, or if the work no longer loves you, then you're in a problem and you might need to switch up. Failure is the heart of all art. We fail 10,000 times more than we succeed. We fail again and again and again. One of the great things about starting writing, for me at the age of 34, was that I was already a failure in life. I hadn't gotten a PhD in political theory. I hadn't taught at Harvard. I hadn't, made $1 million a year. I was just a regular, working class person like most people are in America. I was a failure. And in being a failure, I didn't have to face the hubris of being a writer. I said, well, I'm already, and once you're a failure, you're always a failure. You never, succeed. It's like if you're a boxer. When you lose a fight, you've lost the fight. You can't go back and win that fight. It's over. You lost it. And I think that it's so much better to have failed, because in failing, you can find out the right way of doing things. All those really talented people in their 20s who quit writing, they never failed until they once did, and then they gave up. And that's the thing that you have to do. You write, and it doesn't work, and you write, and it doesn't work, and you write, and it doesn't work, and you write, and it doesn't work. It's okay. you will always fail. But inside of doing that, you will advance and advance and advance and advance.
In the final lesson, lesson number 12, well, yeah, because 13 is just kind of a wrap up. But in the final lesson, talks about living a creative life, and it kind of ties back into the first or second lesson, when he talks about how committed you have to be to, if you want to be serious about writing, if you want to take writing a novel, being a novelist seriously, it's a commitment. You have to, and its creativity is a deep commitment. Um, and he talked about how failure is something that's a good thing or should be seen as a good thing because you learn from your failures. And failure is at the heart of all art. His quote, not mine. In failing, you can find out the right way to do things, but you have to actually try in order to fail. Failure means you tried. Um, so even when we fail, we're not really failing, we're succeeding because now we know what not to do. It didn't work this way, so now we try this way. And you know, you have to fail in order to learn and grow and evolve.
So we've come to the end of the class, and it's time for you to go out there and write your novel. That is the most important thing. You could be living in a cabin in northern Alaska writing your novel, and that would be enough as far as I'm concerned with this masterclass. But I also hope that you develop a community of people who understand what writing is, how difficult it is, how gut-wrenching and emotional it is, and that you're able to talk about who you are and what you do in a community of people who either love writing as much as you do, or love painting as much as you love writing, or love reading. And if you can do that, you can build that community along with writing your novel every day. You've made it. The only thing I need you to leave this class with is the confidence that you can write a novel. It is my hope that you will write that novel. Those two things together, I couldn't ask for anything more.
And there you have it, my masterclass experience with Walter Mosley. I tried to include all of the major important things that I thought were really important to grasp without giving you everything because I want you to go take the class because there's a lot to learn. It's a nearly 3-hour course in total. So I tried to fit as much in there as possible. I hope that you like the class. I hope that you will go and explore and take the class for yourself. I hope you will dive into Walter Mosley's books as I plan to do. So that's going to be it for this video. If you like this video and you want to see more videos from me, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. I post videos on Mondays and Thursdays. So if you hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell, you will receive notifications every time I upload a new video. And let me know in the comments, did you get any good nuggets of wisdom out of my masterclass experience? And also let me know if you have read Walter Mosley's books, and if you have a favorite, drop that in the comments as well. I'm looking for book recommendations because I need to dive into the world of Walter Mosley. Also, if you'd like to support me by checking out all of my social media links and my magazine, my blog site, my online store, all of those links can be found in the description box below. And support me on Ko-fi if you would like to help me expand my creative endeavors that much more to better the experience for those of you who are watching. Until next time, have a blessed day. Bye.